Did it work? Did we go live, Jeff?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it did. We are live. Welcome, everybody. And welcome to episode 5 of season 2 here on our Star Trek DS9 rewatch as we continue our 3.5-year journey to talk about this show. I'm Dave Mader, joined with my brother Jeff Mader tonight. We are absent Jaemeel Robinson. We're not sure where he is, but he's probably indisposed at the moment. He's probably been deposed here, Jeff, by some kind of Cardassian plot to discredit some kind of politician.
Right. Season 2 of DS9 is like eating a stew of Zabo meat. Sometimes you'll get a delicious bite of Zabo, but for the most part, it's been a bitter taste. But I think this episode stands out a little bit. I think this is maybe a juicy part of the Zabo.
Maybe some Rokassa juicy.
Maybe there's some Yamak sauce that will go with their Zabo meat.
Yeah, Garrick likes to drink the Rokassa juice. It soothes his nerves.
The Rokassa juice. This dude doesn't look that bad. I don't get why Rugal and O'Brien they're thumbing their nose up better. They look at each other. They're like, yeah, that does suck. Yeah, okay, cool.
Because and so they don't like the Cardassian. They don't like Cardassians or. Yeah, and O'Brien's racism was showing, but I think that this was good. I think that there was, in terms of how they portrayed it in the narrative, and this episode was a lot better, Jeff, than I remembered it being.
Right. Well, I mean, Garrick and Gul Dukat both get to shine in the episode quite a bit.
It's their first episode together. This is the first time Garrick's been back since season 1. His brief appearance in season 1, right?
Yes, and this episode especially on the rewatch, you stand at how much of a point they make to include Bashir, and pretty much the whole episode is about like how Sisko is just annoyed by Bashir, but he's kind of like just wearing him down. And
I think Bashir takes a big turn in this episode. I think his character, in terms of the Bashir, will come to know as who he is. Like in terms of when I think of Deep Space Nine and I think of Bashir. In just the context of the show, I have a very different Bashir than we have in the season 1 version, or even leading into this early part of season 2. But this was the first time where I saw the Bashir who's intrigued by mystery, who got tough with Garrick when he said, "No, we're stopping this runabout, Garrick, until you tell me what's going on and what exactly it is you think is happening." That's an aggressiveness, a certain assertiveness from Bashir we have not seen up until this point. And I think that they were finally trying to give him something to do.
And he interrupts the conversation with Sisko and Dukat and starts interrogating Dukat. And then Sisko was like, "What the hell was that?" And he's like, "Don't do it again. What do you think this is? You can just butt in and
He's like, "Oh, so Garrick, who isn't telling you about anything, gave you a hunch about you don't know what. So you interrupted my discussion with a politically relevant discussion that has major consequences. You junior officer, dumbass." I liked that moment. That was good.
That was good, but it was also good because it was Bashir kind of getting a taste of what it's like to mix it up in the ropes with Sisko and Dukat, and he started to get he's growing even more than Dax is at this point. I think he's starting to become more of an interesting character for me than Dax is, and it's fast. It's faster than I thought. I thought I was going to hate Bashir, but I still do kind of hate him. He's a dweeb still.
Right. But the big part about Bashir's character ultimately is his sort of relationship with Garrick, which was only set up briefly in season 1 with their brief encounter, right? And now we get this whole episode where they're sort of together here, solving this mystery together, or Garrick's solving it and Bashir's kind of tagging along, trying to figure out what it is. And it all concerns this issue of Cardassian war orphans. So when the Cardassians left Bajor just before the beginning of season 1 of Deep Space Nine, there were a number of orphans, children of Cardassians that were left behind on the planet, and just because of the way Cardassian society is and their culture is, that children without parents have no status in their society, so they're sort of pariahs. They're sort of forgotten about. because the Cardassian societies we'll come to learn more about in this episode is is that the family is everything. They talk about the 4 generations eating at the same table, that's a huge part of who they are. Also, what is the one defining characteristic, Garrick asks, about all Cardassians, right? What is the one trait you would assign to all members of my race? And you're kind of thinking like, is he? I've seen this a few times, but I was like, what, brutality, conquering people,
superiority.
whatever. But he says, no, it's our attention to detail. That is our most unique trait, that our most defining trait about Cardassians, our record keeping. And Garrick's able to exploit that record keeping trait and how things went to kind of expose here what Gul Dukat is up to also in trying to sort of take down one of his political rivals who he disagreed with about the withdrawal from Bajor, that was a political decision. That
it's a little bit of political payback that Dukat's trying to get. It seems like it's not even really that relevant to what's going on today. It is a little bit. It seems like at the time, but it's a little bit. It seems a little bit more like a revenge thing because he was pissed off, which is good for Dukat. I mean, they build him up as this like villain, but you kind of like Dukat. They
will, but at this point, we don't really know Dukat very well at all.
No.
We see him having these conversations with Sisko. They coming down this season, they will use more and more Dukat, and he will become a huge recurring character. But in the first season, he shows up in the very first episode, right? He's only on a few phone calls, and this is the first time we've seen Gul Dukat like on the station walking around since the pilot.
Yes, that's right. That was a fun fact, but it's been but you are correct.
Well, I think it's important because he's such a Marco Limo and Andrew Robinson as Dukat and Garrick respectively is great. This is a great setup for what the series is. It's a great setup for who Bashir is and becomes. Yes. The Garrick Bashir thing, the Garrick Dukat thing set up. I think it's great here that they make them adversaries and that they are definitely not friends, right? Because just the way that Garrick laughs when he goes. Yeah. Your friend Gul Dukat was so concerned. He just goes, like, I bet he was.
Yeah, right? Yeah. He just ignores it. He's just like, and he's on about some orphan boy thing or whatever, and then he gets all interested, right?
Oh, I'm sure he's very concerned about the orphan boy.
The orphan boy. Yeah, that sounds like Dukat.
That sounds like something Dukat would be up to. And they talk about like in the 90s that Dukat was definitely the more popular character. Garrick was not as popular at the time that the show was on. Maybe with the writers he was, but not necessarily with the viewers. But now it's very much flipped, where Garrick in the modern era of DS9 fandom has become like the most iconic Cardassian. Hence this title, the title of this episode, Cardassians, setting up the most 2 important Cardassian characters in all of Star Trek, let alone just Deep Space Nine, I'd say.
Yeah, and they bring in some other Cardassian characters to fill in here with the Gul Vidor guy, or whatever. The father
guy?
Yeah, Rugal, which is
Rugal. Poor little Rugal.
Yeah, and Rugal bites Garrick's hand at the beginning of this episode. Just bites his hand. And you're kind of thinking,
he's a huge chunk out. With those Cardassians can bite. Maybe that's another defining characteristic, Jeff.
Dave, that is the moral question of this episode for me: is should Rugal go back to Bajor with parents who hate his race but love him, or go back to Cardassia with parents who love his race but probably will hate him? That's the dilemma.
Okay, well, what's the real? Like, I'm sure that this has happened in human history, probably more recently, where, like, let's say even in World War II or something like that, where children, of the enemy are left behind, and they are raised as pariahs, or they're outcasts in their own society. I'm sure that there's a lot of real world metaphors for that, and how who the victims of war are.
An American baby raised in North Korea,
right? Or like Vietnam. I'm sure there was cases of this, right? Or it's happened throughout human history where you sort of have children displaced by war, left behind, sometimes be raised by the people who were the victims of that child's group or tribe or whatever. So it's I thought it was important. I think it was showing more about what is sort of like the political fallout, or not just political, but what is the I want to say global or the effect of it, but it's not. It's what are the consequences of Cardassia leaving Bajor, right? Because there's going to be there are going to be people who are hurt, or not less people. Like 10 million people died in the Bajoran, the Cardassian occupation of Bajor, as they say in this episode. So the Cardassians definitely have blood on their hands. The Cardassian Empire.
Right, but Garrick says in this episode, he says like they meant to do that. They meant to leave those orphan boys.
Mm-hmm.
So
and girls. Don't forget about the girls.
And the girls. Yeah.
Excuse me, sir. Are you here to take me back to Cardassia?
Yeah, okay. So I'm like, do the kids want to go back to Cardassia, or do they eventually grow to hate Cardassia? What's the right path for the kids?
In the case of Rugal, he resents who and where he comes from. But
so where's
I don't know. I think it all depends on how old you were, maybe when you were orphaned, and there's probably different factors.
Where's the right place for Rugal to go? Should he go back to Cardassia and learn who he is and like face it head on, or should he stay on Bajor where what should happen? What's the audience meant to think?
I think it's worth mentioning is the guy who plays Rugal's biological father, Kotan Padar.
Padar,
which is one of the great Cardassian names, I gotta say. Kotan Padar. So he's Rugal Padar. And I don't know. I felt like I knew this actor who was playing Kotan Padar. I didn't, but he was great in this role.
Mm-hmm.
As the father who thought his son died, who lost his wife, but on Bajor, and now Rugal, who rejects him, and I thought that he was one of the more human Cardassians, inhuman in that you felt his vulnerability, you felt how personal he was, and talking about his society in a way that Gul Dukat doesn't, and in a way that Garrick doesn't.
Sure, he seemed like an Italian uncle guy. Took care of my family, and it's like that kind of guy. I don't know. He seemed just like a.
Yeah, I took him as a great statesman, as a person of character. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But he at least was part of the reason that the Cardassians got out of Bajor, which I guess it was a good thing that he helped do, right? Maybe because the Bajoran resistance killed his wife and he thought his kid too. And why was he there? But so maybe Rugal has a point. You deserved what happened. You shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Right. So the guy that played Kotan Padar is named Robert Mandan. He was on Soap. He was on Three's a Crowd. He was on Matlock and The Love Boat and Private Benjamin and all sorts of different TV shows from the 70s, basically. He was like a career TV actor.
Well, I think he's one of the standout parts of this episode, really. I don't think we saw this character again. And was, and so I think that's what because at the end, Sisko has agreed to become this arbiter to help decide which family, the Bajoran family or the Cardassian family, that Rugal should live with. And he ultimately decides largely because Rugal was a victim of this political ploy of Gul Dukat against Padar, that the right thing is to set him back with his father, his biological father, not to leave him on Bajor just because of that. And I guess we're led to believe that Rugal was about 12, right? Because he was 4 when he was orphaned, and it was about 8 years ago that happened. So that would make sense. So he's still a minor, but I think that he was good in the episode too, although I think he's much older than 12. And O'Brien, in how he plays into this story, Keiko and Miles, and they taught because O'Brien is a veteran of the Cardassian Federation War, which was pretty brutal. He saw a lot of his friends killed during that, and he does have old grudges for the Cardassians. We saw this in the Next Gen episode. Sorry, the one with the song. You know the one I mean.
Yeah.
The minstrel boy, right? Where him and his old captain couldn't let go of the Cardassian War because his family had been killed in that. And that, but so O'Brien had already had that moment in his TV career, the O'Brien character here. But it shows here that he still does have these prejudices. He's horrified at the idea of Rugal playing with Molly. He says to Keiko, gentleness was bred out of these Cardassians a long time ago. And it's not very evolved for a 24th century human.
No, but O'Brien always has to play the babysitter for some reason. In a lot of episodes, it's like, well, we already have a kid, and sure.
So does Cisco. He has Jake.
I know, but yeah, so it was like Keiko needs something to do. Is Jake even in this episode? I don't think he is.
No, and it's interesting that they didn't bring Jake in to interact with Rugal, considering they're roughly the same age.
Yeah, you thought like when they were like sending Rugal to the school, I was like, okay, well then Jake will be there, Nog, type thing.
The whole hearing takes place in the school.
Right.
It was a little odd on the promenade. They do it.
Would you have liked if they had brought Rugal or Kotar Patan back in a later episode?
Not Rugal. I think I got my fill of Rugal in this episode.
You know what, Rugal?
He did a good job for what this was. But I think that the Kotan Padar was somebody I would have liked to have seen again. Or I would have liked him to play more into the story. But I understand why they didn't. They had a lot to work with just Dukat and Garrick. And they bring Damar on later on. And I'm trying to think who else is a big Cardassian character. And Abentane, of course. Right? Yeah. Right. So, yeah, it was good. Like that part was all good. I thought there was so much beginning. I feel like the show was taking a leap compared to what we were watching a few weeks ago with that Bajoran trilogy.
Yes.
Yeah, this was better, even though it was still playing into the Bajoran occupation fallout and how Bajor and the planet and the system and the sector is changing, and how they're dealing with things.
I kind of like this episode just from the fact that like Garrick Andrew Robinson gets a lot of bone to chew on as far as acting, as far as like what it means for him as a Cardassian. It's just like a lot of his sinister attitude, and he's screwing with Bashir all the time, but he means well, but he's also kind of like shaping Bashir into the character that we're gonna like. I think without Garrick we don't get a good Bashir later on.
I think you're absolutely right. Without Andrew Robinson coming into this series and playing Garrick as much as he did, there must have been something in that first appearance that intrigued them enough to like write this whole episode where Garrick and Dukat were both heavily prominent, and they set a whole bunch of stuff up here. And
they were kind of adversaries as well. They were kind of setting them up as adversaries.
And was Garrick somebody that we could be trusted and whatever? I think that his energy is amazing here. Where when he says to that school teacher there when he's coming to like read about the records, and he was like, I can. What did she say? Like, I wasn't here in the days when that adoption took place. I was in the underground, and he goes, "Oh, well, maybe we met.
Maybe we do know each other." Yeah, that was great. Yeah,
that was great.
He has so many great moments in this episode where he just like says like something where you're just like, "Wow, you don't see it coming," but it works so well because of his attitude, his charm.
Yeah, how do you think that came to be? Do you think he just took that dialogue and he just brought a whole new energy to the character? And
yeah, I think like I think like especially in this episode, like I think he just has a certain charm or attitude to the character, and then he just takes the dialogue and kind of like lays it on, and then the writers help him out back, and then he has a certain way of like just dialogue and discourse. Like he has a certain way of going about it, and he's one of the best waltzers, I would say, as far as kind of like Varys or Baelish in Game of Thrones. He has a lot of those same abilities to kind of like just paint the canvas with his words.
Yeah, he just does a great job, and I understood why. It's crazy to me that certain people were never series regulars, himself included, like Andrew Robinson as Garrick, because he lives on the station. He's in this show way more than Keiko is, for instance, way more than even Jake.
Mm-hmm.
But he never really had that status. Not that it really matters, but there's all these people who I think are main cast but aren't considered main cast, and I think Garrick is one of them. Maybe not at this point in the show, but like from season 5 on, the last 3 seasons certainly.
Garrick was only on Deep Space Nine. He's like Rom. Rom's main cast too,
but not originally, right? Like these were background characters or recurring characters that sort of earned their way. And even I think Nog wasn't necessarily going to have as much screen time in his play as he did, or wasn't. They didn't know for sure, but he ended up doing it because Aaron Eisenberg did so great with the role. And I think when you have great actors, it just gives writers a lot to do. Like, hey, well, maybe Garrett. I know Andrew Robinson can pull this kind of line off, or I think Aaron Eisenberg can do this, or this would play well. And so that's why these Star Trek shows do tend to get better as they go. And we see this leap here where the show has been really faltering for a while and gotten better.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And what this episode kind of like is, it's starting to break away from the season 1 kind of boringness that they were going with, a lot of just like plot wise. It was a lot of stuff. It was kind of stagnant show, and I feel like this episode was kind of like getting the engine going. For what we're going to get in the future. And I think the Cardassians are probably like the best. One of the best things about DS9 is the Cardassian element to the way the station's designed. They refer to Tarek Noor. You got Gul Dukat. You got Garrick. We don't have Zial because she's not around yet, but when she is, like, she's a big Cardassian character as well. Kind of like but she like Rugel's the pre-Zial maybe. And like, yeah, so like I don't know, like they have a great. I could watch a whole show. Just if they did a whole Cardassian Star Trek show, I'd watch that.
Well, the Cardassians are really interesting, and the Bajorans less so. But the Cardassians, well, that's why they're interesting. Is because they're maybe not as noble or not as completely noble. They resemble our society a little bit more in a lot of other ways, or the humans of the 20th century at least.
Do you think it'd be cool if they did a movie or a story or a show about like the Bajoran occupation and like they like? Do you think that would be, or like to do like a whole resistance cell, like Star Trek resistance cell, and do like a whole
show? I don't know. I don't know if I need a whole show about that. Like, I think that you maybe could do smaller stories, like maybe a mini series. I don't know, but something. I don't need a series about the Bajoran occupation necessarily. I'm always like, I don't want to go back. I already know what happened. I want to know what's going to happen next. And so, if you did a Bajoran occupation story, I would just be like, well, I know they're going to win their freedom in 2369. So. Right. The rest of this is sort of like for naught.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's just like I would like to. I would like a show maybe that's not focused on one particular backstory thing, but if you could like fill in the gaps about this, that, or whatever, I would like that.
Yeah, as you went along type thing.
You could do a show that is like every episode is like, okay, this is a story about trills, or this is a story about I don't know, the brain, or whatever you want to do.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Right? That you could even do it. You could do it with a ship that just goes to these places, but you could do it.
Star Trek species. Every episode's about a different species.
I think it's more interesting to do like a Black Mirror almost format where every story is a new story or something's intriguing about it, but you can learn something about the story, about the universe that I don't need, like, that's why I'm like, okay, but now you're going to do a Bajoran occupation show, and what's that going to be? And now you're going to want to write new stories that are not going to fit well into what's already been established, and then we'll get into messes like we do with Enterprise.
I think you're right. It'd be better if it was like a Black Mirror type show.
Right. Like it's like asking, like, do you think it'd be cool to have a show where, like, set 100 years before Kirk about a crew that is the first starship in space? Yeah, that sounds awesome. Okay, here it is. It's Enterprise. I don't like this so much. So it could work, but I think it's more likely to not work.
That has a lot more to do with the casting, though, to me, and the
writing. It's not just about premise. You're right. Like Deep Space Nine as a premise is kind of interesting, but there's not a lot there. There's not a lot of meat on the bone. You have to kind of invent it from the ground up, which maybe is what made it good.
Yeah, that's right. And like you said, this is an episode where, like, we got Dukat, we got Garrick, we want to put these guys in episodes because we like them. And I think they just made sure to write an episode that was like, okay, we'll just bring that from boy in. We'll have bring a guest star. We'll do that, and then we'll have the Garrick Dukat mystery thing that Bashir will make Bashir less lame.
Yeah, well, I think that the fact that Bashir actually has some guts, right?
But I feel like Sisko wants to hit him.
Okay, so Garrick shows up in Bashir's quarters while he can't sleep. He's tossing and turning on those uncomfortable Cardassian beds, which, by the way, we maybe brought this up before. We will definitely bring it up again. I don't understand why they have to sleep on Cardassian beds if they're not comfortable. Can they not just replicate human beds?
They could, but that wouldn't be funny.
Could the Enterprise not drop off a bed or a couple beds?
No. Couldn't spare a square.
No, they're like these quarters can only hold a Cardassian bed. If you try to put a human bed in these quarters, won't work. Don't know why, it just won't. It's whatever. But anyway, so Garrick shows up, and then so Bashir, this is the second time he annoys Sisko in the episode, where he shows up to ask for the runabout to go to Bajor, and Sisko's in his pajamas with a bathrobe. Jeff, I want to talk about this outfit because I don't know
what's he doing.
What was exactly going on there? I need to know. Have we seen Sisko wear pajamas before or since this?
I don't think so. But
the neckline on Sisko is also very.
I got it there.
Right, and he's just looking at Bashir like, "Are you serious?" And he's like, "I'd like to borrow a runabout." He's like, "Oh, just one runabout, huh?" You know, I don't know. Yeah. Was this really a thing that he had to ask Sisko's permission for? Like to go to borrow a runabout to go to Bajor? Like,
yes, Garrick
woke him up. Can I borrow the car, Dad, please?
Garrick woke him up, and they had to go to Bajor and figure this out.
And he's well, yeah, it was just silly. Again, I'm like, all right, but I love Sisko just having no time for Bashir. He clearly does not like him.
He doesn't like him waking him up in the middle of the night. It's not that he doesn't like him. He doesn't like what he does. He doesn't like him interrupting him when he's talking to Gul Dukat. I go as far
as to say that Sisko doesn't like Bashir. At this point, at least.
I wouldn't say he doesn't like him.
I don't think anybody likes Bashir that much. I think Jadzier's friendly with him.
I think O'Brien likes him by now, no? Or no?
No, O'Brien doesn't even like him at this point.
No, he still hates him.
Still hates him. I think that's why Bashir and Garrick make sense to become friends, because Bashir is kind of the outcast. Like, he's kind of like the guy nobody likes. He's sort of like he's part of the senior staff and he's a competent doctor, but beyond that, they don't seem to have much use for him.
And they kind of both are charming, but in different ways. You know, like they if there was a charm scale, Bashir would be on one side and Garrick would be on the other. They're very different at charming. I would say, right? I
like their banter. I like the fact that Garrick is clearly smarter than Bashir. You know,
is he?
I think so. That's always my read on it. Is that Bashir? Garrick is always a step ahead of Bashir.
Yeah, so that I agree with. He's a step ahead of him. But I don't like, especially once they reveal the genetic, whatever they did to Bashir, engineering. Then I think they make it kind of like Bashir smarter.
Well, they turned Bashir into a super person after that, saying that he always was. But
do you think they just came up with that later and they were like, let's just change that about Bashir, or were they always gonna reveal that at some point? Or
I don't think it was always the plan of the show. No, by any means. It's interesting, kind of.
If they had done it from the beginning, would it have been better?
Would it have been better if we had known that about him? Going
If that happened in season 1, like that episode, like or right around now, like when do they find out he's genetically engineered?
It's not till like season 5, I think. So it's
right.
And it's kind of interesting too. But at the same, and I like that episode just in terms of how he talks about before the genetic engineering, he couldn't tell a house from a dog or whatever it was, but that he was so far behind that his parents felt like they had to do it. And I think that there's a lot of I think when we get to that episode, there's a lot to unpack there. But I don't think that Sadig El Fadil or Alexander Sadig or whatever name he chooses to go by would have played this part the way he did if he had known that stuff.
Right.
If they said, okay, well, the thing with your character is he's genetically engineered. I think he always would have played it more confident or more intellectual than instead of sort of this more than he did. And I don't think that the Bashir character changed that much after that reveal, really, other than he was more confident. But I always chalk that up to he's in the war. He's sort of his spirit has been broken, like by the Dominion War.
Right. But it makes sense that he was smart.
He's a doctor. He's going to be smart.
Right. So it was easy to write into it that he was like, but he's super smart and you don't understand. And I don't know, like it would have been like they already knew about the eugenics wars before they wrote DS9, right? Like that wasn't something they came up with later, right?
Right. That was already established. Yeah. But there wasn't a ton about genetic engineering other than it was banned among humans. And it's not banned among the other species in the Federation, just among humans. That's a human Earth specific law because of the eugenics wars. So the human race decided to ban genetic engineering, but other species definitely practice it.
Like the Cardassians.
Like the Cardassians, like the Klingons, like others have done it. Like they dabble in it for better or worse.
Right.
Usually it's usually bad. Usually it doesn't go well.
But isn't it funny?
Yeah, fun facts, Jeff.
We can do that. Bring it up, but I mean, I enjoyed the episode. I have to say,
I did. It was great. Like it was a lot better than I remembered. I wasn't super excited coming into it for this one. I was like, oh, it's the one. It's Cardassians. He's a Cardassian. But this was great. This was a great episode. If I had to take anything away from it, it's the fact that the lighting is a little too TNG for me in a lot of scenes.
This episode does feel very TNG, especially with the Rugal stuff. Feels like it's a TNG scene on the DS9 set.
Well, yeah, just the way it's lit. I don't know who directed the episodes. Cliff Bowl, who's done a bunch of stuff, a bunch of Next Gen, and yeah, he did 25 Next Gen episodes, 7 Deep Space Nine. So he's definitely more of a Next Gen director and 10 Voyagers. But so there was something about the lighting and the feel and some of the framing of the scenes that felt very Next Generation to me. Like I thought that in particular the hearing in the classroom felt strange. The whole way that was staged, and I don't know. They keep like Deep Space Nine does a series of courtroom dramas, right? And remember that when we did the Dax one, it was in Quarks, right? They closed down Quarks so they could do the trial for her there,
right,
or the hearing, and then when Worf later on will have his trial, it will be in like this conference room, but then here this one is in the classroom, no
rules.
I just don't know. I think it's sort of strange that Deep Space Nine does not have a proper meeting place.
You think they would have put that into the set like later on?
You think if you're going to build that huge promenade set, there would be like some kind of like a stage and crowd set, right? You think that'd be part of the church, for instance, or something, the Bajoran Temple. But it's not like and so it's one of the missteps I think of this set design. It's just there's never anywhere good for them to have a meeting.
Yeah, probably.
Anyway,
okay. Fun facts. this is the first time there's reference to the Cardassian name of Deep Space Nine, Terok Nor. So it's the first time they mentioned it, that, Dave.
That's the first time?
Yeah, this is the first episode when they call it Terok Nor. This is the first time since the pilot that Gul Dukat has visited Deep Space Nine.
All right. I spoiled you there, Jeff. I remembered. I figured that out.
Director Cliff Bull defines this episode as being about humanist values.
Humanist. Define? What's humanist?
I don't know.
Humanism is a philosophical stance that emphasizes the value and agency of human beings individually and collectively. So basically, like I've met Cardassians I didn't like, and I've met Cardassians I have liked. That it's about choice and who you are, and not about your species or your tribe or anything like else.
Right. Garrick, the Cardassian tailor, is seen for the first time since his initial appearance in Star Trek DS9 past prologue. So haven't had him for a while, but we get him here.
Well, it was a big leap. It was like they went from giving them like 3 lines in past prologue to giving them basically most of this episode with Bashir, which great move.
Yes. The novel The Never-Ending Sacrifice depicts Rugel's life after Cardassians. It begins just after the episode ends and continues for 8 years. Yeah, somebody wrote this.
So somebody continued the story?
That's right. In a book called The Never-Ending Sacrifice.
Which is isn't that the name of the book that Garrick loves, that he tells Bashir to read on later on the show? Did you read The Never-Ending Sacrifice? And Bashir's like, yeah, I was reading it. And then it's about how this family loses everything. They give everything up to the state. And then the next generation just does it again. He's like, isn't it great? Because that's what Cardassians love. They love the idea of their homeland, of their country, of like they're very proud of the fatherland. They're very Nazi, very German.
They're the Germans.
They're the Germans, yeah. The Cardassians.
Garrick even says he's like we're the good at keeping records, and we taught lots of different places to keep records.
Who would that be?
Yeah, the Germans.
The Germans are an industrious people.
Rugel was born in 2358. This takes place in 2370.
Right.
And that's it. That's fun facts. Fun facts with Jeff. Fun facts. Fun facts.
Well, that's it. That was the shortest fun facts ever. All right. Let's rate this episode. Let me get the rating. I don't know what happened to Jaemeel.
There is one goof. Garrick refers to the Cardassian father as Padur rather than Padar.
Who does?
Garrick.
Maybe it's a regional dialect. Okay.
I do like the whole line he has, though, where he's like, truth, doctor, is in the eye of the beholder. I never tell the truth because I don't believe there is such a thing. That's why I prefer the straight line simplicity of cutting cloth. Like, that's a really well-written dialogue, I would say.
Great, some great dialogue they gave him. And but it's the whole package, right? It's the whole vibe. It's the just looking up the IMDb rating for this episode.
I believe it's 7.6.
So you are correct. 7.6. Okay. So let's rate. All right. So who's not here? Well, everybody else. Okay. So Jeff, you want to go first?
I give this one about an 8.3.
8.3. Okay. I'm going to give it a... I feel like 8.8 is appropriate. So that averages between Jeff and I at 8.6. With the 7.6 this episode comes out to 8.1. That is our best episode since Duet, Jeff.
Yeah, that's a good one, and I think Jaemeel and them will probably give some good ratings there too.
Yeah, and we'll update the ratings later on if they choose to submit their ratings. But that was, because we've considering the average for the Cardassian trilogy was 4.4 per every episode. This is
the Bajoran trilogy.
The Bajoran trilogy. I'm referring to the Homecoming, the Circle, and the Siege, which is the 3 episodes that opened the second season, which we did not love. We did not really enjoy largely rewatching because it was just
boring.
Boring. Yeah, like not fun, not memorable. But this was great, and this is only 2 episodes later where we're getting Garrick, we're getting Dukat, we're getting and how the Bajorans play into that a little bit. But okay, we didn't talk about the guy who plays the Bajoran father of the Bajoran adoptive father of Rugal. Right. What did you think of him?
He's pretty racist himself.
Yeah, right.
He might be the most racist person in the episode, but he seems to mean well. But O'Brien says it to the Rugal kid. He's like, "Well, what? Why do you want to be with people who hate you?" And he's like, "They don't hate me. They just hate what I am."
They kind of do, though.
Right?
They're kind of probably not the appropriate people to be raising you. They did a good job, and I don't think they're bad people, but right. It's probably not the best environment considering.
So it is probably good that at the end of the episode, Rugal goes back to Cardassia.
Well, we'll have to read the Never-Ending Sacrifice to be sure, Jeff.
Yeah, the Never-Ending Sacrifice could definitely be the definitive answer of whether or not Rugal should have went back. What did you think of the alien guy that looked like he had 2 suction cups on his forehead by the name of Zolan?
Zolan was he was this businessman who was playing Dabo.
He was winning Dabo quite a bit. He has 2 mushrooms on his forehead. He kind of looks like a Klingon who got his forehead smashed in. Yeah, we don't know the species. Basically, I thought it was okay. Basically, my thought of him was, I know he's bad because he's fat. Basically, anytime there's a bad guy character or somebody who's corrupt, that character is always fat, and he usually laughing and loving gambling. Like anybody who is that one of those things. This guy was all of those things. I was like, this guy is lying. He's not trustworthy at all. All he needed was I think he had it was some women. Like a woman on his shoulder, a bunch of money in his hand, which he had. And there he is on the screen if you're watching along with us. Yeah. I was like, this guy's definitely evil, or he's corrupt or something, right? So he looks like he had pancakes on his head. It looks like the makeup job was interesting. I find it distracting actually, and I don't know. Sometimes I think they just throw too many weird aliens in. I'm like, this is one of my other gripes sometimes with Star Trek is there's just so many planets and so many aliens that it's hard to I get it's. How big is this? You know what I find strange about Star Trek, especially, is how do humans and Cardassians and Bajorans they all breathe the same air? Wouldn't Cardassians want it to be hotter and to be more they like different climates? Yeah, but isn't it weird that they both breathe the same way? And they've they all the species need oxygen the same way, and it's more weird that they all use the same gravity. Well, that too, and then and their perception of time should also be all different every species. Yeah, gravity is a direct effect of that, right? But we do. I don't know. It will be this season. We get this character who comes along who's from the planet where gravity is much lower. Mm-hmm. So, but because every other species is kind of from what we consider 1G, the one standard Earth gravity, that's pretty common, I guess, among these species or among the planets, even because any planet that is more than 1G, certainly any more than 5Gs. You couldn't beam down to it. You couldn't go there. So, because it would kill you, it would crush you, right? So but are they all Class M planets? Like Cardassia and Klingon, like Kronos, Romulus? Are they all Class M? Yes. Class M is basically the Earth-type planet that
whatever. And gravity is basically directly based on size and mass, right? So all these planets have to be relatively the same size.
Right.
I'm not a physics expert, but
what are the Cardassians? Are they like these like fish people, or like is that what they are? Or like what
they're lizard people?
Lizard fish got people?
I think I always took them they were descended from lizards because they have scales and whatever.
Kind of like if a dinosaur became a person.
A little bit, but those are the Voth, Jeff. Don't confuse them with the Voth.
I know the Voth, yeah. See?
From Star Trek Voyager. No, yeah, the Cardassians are lizard-like. We know that they drink hot fish juice in the morning.
The one thing I definitely noticed is Dukat and Garrick's like color of their skin is like completely different. Like Dukat's like purple, like this purple gray color, and like Garrick is like this like white beige color.
Yeah, his makeup looks weird, and his outfit is weird too.
And Padar, yeah, so he looks like he's pregnant, Garrick. I don't know what's going on with what he's wearing.
He's wearing like this striped like shirt. He looks like Sandman from the Spider-Man comics. Like he's with like a weird vest over top. Like for a tailor, he doesn't have a great fashion sense in this episode.
No, he doesn't.
He gets better. Garrick does get better outfits, but this is whatever they threw him into.
He's got better than Rugal. Oh, by the way, the other fun fact was the guy that played Rugal, the kid. He was also a kid in other like TV stuff before this. But this was the last thing he ever did.
Just turned him off acting.
He was done with acting. This is the last performance he has on IMDb as a credit.
He was that makeup.
He was done. He was like, I've had it with Star Trek. He also did a kid role on TNG in one episode.
Yeah, he was the Romulan kid in Unification Part 2. He's the one who goes to Spock. Oh, my father my parents had these old like Vulcan toys, and remember Spock is talking to this kid about it when he's on in that Next Generation 2-parter.
I haven't seen it in a while, so
yeah. Well, he's a Romulan kid in that. That's what he was.
Is he better in that than this?
No, he's about the same.
He's about the same.
Very much the same. I don't think I'd say he's worse than that. I think he's better than this.
Why do Cardassians wear football equipment?
What do you mean?
Like he's Dukat, like and like all those like the Cardassian military guys, like they wear like basically like a football shoulder pad.
Are you know with the design of their military uniform?
Yes.
I'm not. I don't know. I always thought the Cardassian uniform looked uncomfortable.
It does.
I was like, "What is this thing?" I think it's partly designed to allow for their big necks to come out of it.
Yes.
Because they have these big, wide, scaly necks. It looks very militaristic. It's rigid. I think that these were easy for them to sort of swap out for actors depending on what their needs were. Durable.
All these things I thought about.
I've thought about it, but I never loved I liked that Garrick wasn't one that wore one of those uniforms. I liked that when we got a lot of Cardassians, civilian Cardassians who came along on this show. And I think it is important to show the diversity of a species and how they're the same and how they're not, right? And what makes them unique and whatever.
Yeah, so, how your upbringing and where you come from, when those things collide, what happens. I think that's what this episode's all about. Yeah, nature versus nurture, and like does Rugal? Rugal didn't have anything to do with the occupation. Rugal doesn't have to feel bad about being Cardassian, does he? I don't know. Like I think it's not about whether he does or doesn't. He does, and I could kind of understand. Like if you were imagine you were like a German kid growing up in Israel, after World War II. It's kind of that's kind of what this would be like. Yeah. Right, but it's so Cardassians and Bajorans visually look so different from each other. It's also like you can tell from across a room that you're a Cardassian, right? Right. But if you're like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed German, You're not gonna
You
look.
could still be Jewish. Like you don't know.
Sure, you could, but you're not gonna most likely be from the Middle East.
Right, but like what I'm saying is that the Cardassians who are left on this planet maybe just they stick out a little bit more than most because of the obvious difference between the species. But
do you think Keiko's mean for making O'Brien eat the Zabo meat?
My question was why does I understood like a little bit why Keiko wanted to replicate a Cardassian dish. But I don't understand why Miles had to eat it, or was that just because she was mad about what he said about them, the ugly comment he said?
I think she's punishing him.
Because it's a replicator. It can replicate any food. He can make his own. He can replicate anything he wants.
Yeah.
He can just put it back in the replicator and get like something else, can he?
So we get that moment where they both push the plate across the table, where they cling together, and they go, "Yeah, fuck Kardashians food. It sucks." You know.
Did they get new food, or did Keiko say no? Then no more dinner for you.
I don't know. They didn't. All they show is the next time is Orion's hard at work, and then Rugal comes in from the bedroom. Looks like he went and took a sonic shower or something. And then so he's back, and then Orion's doing his best babysitting, man. Like he not only is he fixing the station and making it work, but he's also a counselor.
He can never fix his marriage though. He's always in shit with Keiko.
Because Keiko's kind of a pain in the ass. I mean, let's face it. Like she's kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Well, we don't get enough of Brian and Keiko being happy, do we?
No, because like he'd rather go hang out with Julian, or like. And at this point, he doesn't even have Julian, so he's miserable.
Yeah. At this point, he's not. Well, Brian's not come alive here, but yeah. Keiko, has she been around this season yet?
She has now.
I don't know.
No, I don't think she was in the first few episodes, especially the Bajoran trilogy, the great Bajoran trilogy.
No, she was, because remember she's like, no, we should go to we need to leave, and he wouldn't leave with him.
Right. That was the only scene. Yes,
that was right. And we were like, oh, Brian, you should have went.
I don't know. Ashley,
you get why he stayed?
Yeah, I mean, he's more loyal to his captain than his marriage.
To Keiko, and his daughter.
Yes, this is well established, Dave.
He's not even a captain yet. He's only a commander.
He's a military man. He has to do what's military asks him. Keiko, shut up, or he
doesn't really need a Brian. Like as we established at the end of the siege, which was 2 episodes ago, that O'Brien really didn't need to stay. But
no, but yes, he did. He needed the help with the resistance.
He had to click the lights. Whatever he does in the one scene, he
had to help with the resistance. He can't leave Cisco high and dry. See, Cisco's his boy.
No, there were plenty of other people there. Like he was fine.
He said earlier in season 1, he's like, if anyone's got a problem with Cisco, they're got a problem with me. And he's like, yeah, fuck yeah, Cisco. I'm Cisco's boy, right? He said that.
He did.
So, I think so. He says that. He definitely says that at some point.
I don't think he said he's Cisco's boy. I don't think he said that.
No, he didn't say that. But you know what I mean. He was like, if anybody has a problem with Cisco, they have a problem with me. He says something like that.
Who did he say it to?
I think he says it to Bashir at some point. I don't recall.
All right. I just want to know. I'm trying to understand. I'm always trying to reestablish, what relationship does Cisco have with all of his crewmen? We've established
he hates them all, other than Dax.
He hates Bashir.
Yes.
O'Brien, he's always annoyed with because O'Brien's not fixing stuff. Well, you want to fix these replicators, Chief. Stop making Zabo meat, the Cardassian stew. I don't want it. And
he's kind of got this intimidation thing with Odo. Him and Odo go back and forth.
Odo always wants to quit, and Cisco's always trying to talk him out of it.
Yes. And then with, I guess, there's really not that many,
Kira.
Kira, he's pretty
He doesn't come down on Kira too often.
I think he likes Kira.
He likes Kira. He doesn't like when she goes rogue, but he gives her the least amount of shit.
Yeah, he likes the girls. The boys he gives the shit to, especially Bashir.
Especially Bashir. Bashir is just his goat who he likes to kick.
Worf too. Well, he kicks Worf's ass a bunch once Worf comes on.
Well, I always liked that though, because I thought that he was teaching Worf how to become a captain. And that was sort of that was the Cisco Worf relationship that wasn't the Picard Worf relationship. that there was way more of a mentorship between Sisko and Worf.
Yeah, but because Picard and Worf, it was like
more father son.
More like, I need you firing phasers, and you're doing well, kid. And
but like when Picard goes with Worf to for the discommendation stuff, like the trial about his father, right? Like and he stands with him, like that. Picard, like, and we will talk about more of that when Worf gets to the show. But I actually really liked the Worf Sisko relationship.
Yeah, it's really good. There's a lot of good moments that they're kind of all different, but in this episode, I don't know, like the Dukat Sisko got a lot of good playing, like people playing against each other, and Sisko just seems annoyed to be getting through this episode, kind of like we're probably going to be annoyed getting through season 2, but not when we get episodes like this.
No, I think we have highs and lows in this season, and just looking ahead to the next episode, which is called Melora. Oh, this is the one with the gravity, Jeff, as we were talking about. The lady who comes from a planet that's way less gravity, and it's actually another Bashir focused episode in terms of the main cast character involved. There's a guest star. Her name is Melora Paslar. She's from the Elysian system. And we'll talk a little bit about that next week. But look ahead to that. So when she's on standard gravity, she has to be in a wheelchair. So it's an episode about people living with disabilities. It's an episode about the fact that like not every planet would have the same gravity, and how would you deal with that? Like, let alone atmosphere, Jeff, is definitely a thing that they touch on sometimes, that some aliens do breathe different atmospheres, but they tend to avoid that stuff for like recurring characters because it's just complicated. So
she is handicapped on Deep Space Nine, but on her planet she's not.
On her planet or on a ship that just has the gravity set to what she's used to, she's fine. So when she's in her quarters, she can be in her standard gravity.
So this is what I'm talking about. So how can she be in Starfleet?
Well, and they talk about that, like that most people in her species don't go into Starfleet because of this. That she kind of was someone who went against the grain. And
why couldn't they just set her up with like an astrometric slab, set it to her gravity, get her floating around, get her,
Well, the other alternative is you just like put a whole ship of only her species out there, right? Like so that they can all, or at least only people who deal in the same gravity as she does, right? Like so, maybe there's other planets like Alasia that would be the case, and then you don't have to worry about that so much. They talk about it like next week. There's married couples who get married from different species who don't even breathe the same atmosphere. And you find ways to make it work. You find ways to overcome adversity, obstacles like that, if that's what your passion in life is. But she gets a real chip on her shoulder because of it, which is kind of what makes her not as memorable of a character, maybe, or as beloved of a character.
Bashir steps in and ruins it, right?
Bashir steps in and ruins it.
Job well done.
Yeah, and then he tries to cure her, and we'll get to that next week, but it doesn't play out so well. So,
okay.
So more world building. I don't think that's the worst episode of season 2 by far. At least I don't remember it being that bad. So we're going to be looking ahead to that next week. Also tomorrow on the original series Rewatch here on Live Long and Podcast, we're going to be covering an episode called The Savage Curtain, which is an episode where a weird lava alien made Captain Kirk and Abraham Lincoln and Spock fight against a whole bunch of villains just to see which was more powerful, good or evil. Is that crazy? It sure is. Check that out tomorrow night at 7. Also, tomorrow night on our other channel, Super Mated Brothers Podcasting, we're covering the veto episode for season 22 of Big Brother USA. We are heading into the 8th week, or we are in the 8th week now. And this Thursday, we're also going to be covering the triple eviction. So that's going to be a 2-hour episode. We're going to be coming on late at 10:30 that night. Because of that, we're going to do our Star Trek Lower Decks rewatch that we do on Thursdays earlier. Jeff, we talked a little bit about this, but we're going to be doing 7 o'clock. We're all going to have to illegally download the episode before it airs on CTV Sci-Fi, just so that we can check that out and get that podcast in. Otherwise, we'll be talking about Lower Decks way too late. And our third and then we'll be doing Star Trek Radio Theater here on Live Long and Podcast, likely on Saturday. We have to set the exact day. We're doing an episode called Sabrosa, which is the Beverly Crusher and Space Ghost candle thing going on in season 7. I'm going to be Beverly Crusher, so check that out. And
my!
Oh my!
Oh man!
So Jody, you're our heroes too. And what's the other thing? Trivial Debates. Speaking of Jody Simpson, we just did that on Sunday. We did the Triple Threat Tag Team match where we were all going to battle. Me and Jeff versus Jaemeel and Chris versus Jody and Kevin. I won't ruin it, but it was quite the fight. So check that out if you haven't yet. All right. Well, signing off here for Star Trek DS9 Rewatch on Live Long and Podcast. I'm Dave Mader on behalf of Jeff Mader. Have a great night, guys, and we'll see you for the next one.